friends, welcome to Cupcake Cat. My name's Angela, and on today's video we're going to be working on 11 tiered tray items for St. Patrick's Day. Let's jump into crafting. This project you're going to need 6 popsicle sticks. I'm creating a wooden banner to go across the top tier of my tiered tray that will say luck and have 2 shamrocks on each side. So I'm taking a popsicle stick and I cut one end off and cut the other end at an angle, and using that as a guide for length, cut the second popsicle piece off. And then using the remaining piece of that popsicle stick, I'm going to cut it down to create a brace for the back to help hold these 2 pieces together. And repeated that process on all 6 popsicle sticks. Once that was done, I taped the 2 popsicle sticks together so that the angled part was going the same direction, and then drilled a hole through them so that I could add string through them and didn't have to glue it to the back of these. Once that was done, I then took hot glue and glued those together using that piece we had saved. And because I'm using craft sticks and they're not always straight, I decided to pull out my wood filler and lightly fill in that crack between the 2 so it looked like one solid piece once I painted them. Using my hairdryer to dry those off and giving it a quick light sand, I was ready for paint. I did give these all a coat of white paint first. I kind of changed my mind mid-project and decided to go a different route. So I ended up giving 4 of these 2 good coats of the dark green, and then added some white paint to the dark green to make it more of a mint green, and painted the 2 ends of those. Using my Cricut, I cut out some vinyl stickers of some shamrocks and the word luck and placed those on the banner pieces. After placing some hot glue on my string, I started to weave it through the banner, starting in the front, going through the back so you didn't see the string in front. And once that was all done, I wrapped the string around the back side and tied a knot and cut it off because I didn't actually want any excess string sticking off, because I'm sticking this on the edge of my tiered tray. A tiered tray is not complete without a book stack, so I'm drawing the lines on this Dollar Tree crate to create the sides, and then I'm going to start to paint. And just like true Angela fashion, mid-project, I decided I didn't like the way it was turning out, so I changed it. Here you can see that I've done 2 of the books in dark green and then that middle one in white, and by the time I got done with it, I just was not happy. So I ended up mixing some white and green paint to create that mint color again to kind of tie into the banner, and then painted that on to the bottom book. And then using my Cricut, I cut out some words for each book in the saying, "You're my lucky charm," and placed those on each one of the books. The only green and St. Patrick's Day ribbon I had was wired, and I didn't like it, so I cut off the wired sections on each side of this darker green translucent ribbon, and then I also had a lighter green one which I cut a little skinnier so that you could still see the darker green, and then I took this St. Patrick's Day ribbon and cut it even smaller and just glued all 3 pieces to the bottom side of the book. And then I had created these 2 little bows on top. Like I've said many times, I'm not a bow person, but it needed something up there. This project is so quick and easy. I've had these little leprechaun boots in my craft stash for a few years and didn't really know how to use them for St. Patrick's Day. But when I purchased these shamrock necklaces for another project, I thought, oh, this would be perfect to place the regular round beads inside with some of the cut off shamrock pieces, using a full necklace for each. And then after all the shamrocks were in, it wasn't quite full, so I took a 3rd beaded necklace and cut it into quarters, filling up the rest of the top half with that quarter of a necklace, and then the last quarter putting them underneath the boot in the toe and using some clear tape just to hold those in. And then taking some black vinyl, I cut out some strips to use as the strap, and then using my X-Acto knife, I cut out the buckle in gold and placed those on, and just like that, it's done. So quick and easy. I had this left over from Valentine's Day, and I wanted to create a Clover stand with it, but I didn't like the scalloped top, so I took it out to the garage and cut that off after removing all of the embellishments. And then I ended up sanding these down, and I did take the blade out of my razor knife to get the remaining glue off because I didn't want any of that to be seen through the paint. And then I tried to remove as much of this white paint with the words and gave it all a good couple coats, 3 coats I believe, of green paint, using my hairdryer in between to speed up that process. And then once I was done, I drilled holes at the top where the banner will go across because I wanted to string it through and not glue it down or use staples or anything like that. Once the string was through, I tied a knot on each end, tying it tight, and then took more of those clovers off the necklace, cutting them down and using those on the banner. And I did actually do this double-sided because it wasn't hanging right. They kept wanting to fall forward and not be straight. So adding a layer on the backside did give me that stability. And then I took these 2 clovers, placing a small one on top of a larger one in opposite colors, and placed those on. And then Dollar Tree had these little tiny glass jars forever, and my Dollar Tree clearanced out a lot of their Crafter's Square section, and I could not find them anywhere. So I wanted to create my own using a craft stick. I just created a mason jar looking piece for the side of this, and then using my Cricuts print to cut feature with a sticker paper, I guess, I created a mason jar shape with some shamrocks inside and put that down on the mason jar and cut off the excess with my X-Acto knife. And then I wanted the top to be silver, so I took a little tiny piece of aluminum foil and placed that on the top, wrapped it around, cut off the excess, shaped it a little bit as needed, and then wrapped some green jute twine around the top with a bow, cut off the excess of the tails, and then it was ready to glue onto our Clover stand. I did also create a name for our clover field here, Lucky Clover Co., and placed that on the top of the Clover stand. And then also using that print to cut feature, I created this sticker to go on the front side of the stand. Using the hinge method, I was able to get the placement correct before placing it down, adding a couple dabs of hot glue to our mason jar. This is another quick and easy project. Using some heart picks from Dollar Tree, I cut the sticks off of 2 of them and left it on the 3rd so that I can create a 3-leaf clover. And I did that to 2 of them, and then taking 4 hearts, I cut the sticks off of all of those and placed those together as a freestanding 4-leaf clover. Using hot glue, I just glued the hearts together to create these clovers. I had these blocks left over from Christmas, and I took some spackling and filled the holes, but I left it somewhat sticking out. I didn't smooth it down because spackling will shrink as it dries, and it's easier to sand off the excess than it is to have to refill the hole. So I kind of just gooped that on, and then once those were dry, I sanded them down and then started to paint these. I made the same kind of concept that I'm doing here for my Valentine's Day tiered tray. If you haven't seen that, I will go ahead and link it in the cards. But I gave 3 of these a couple coats of the green paint, and it did take 3 coats, I believe, to cover up those letters. And then I painted 2 of them white. And it wasn't until I started painting this block that I realized, hello, you had 2 white blocks. Why didn't you just paint this one green? But you know, you live, you learn. Just going in order of how I had them set up on my tray before painting. And once everything was dry, I decided to paint these on this time instead of using my Cricut. Using a small fine paintbrush, I first drew the letters so I could trace them because I am not great at freehand stuff, but I try anyways. And I wrote out L, C, and Y in white paint, and then the K, I used green paint to create that one. And I had originally decided to use a green clover to match the green K on the other white block. But then last minute, after I painted it and got it looking the same green color as I'd been using in this, I decided that I didn't really want it to be green. This project needed gold to kind of go with the theme. So I did not end up using this, and it's so funny because I did this a few days between making it and setting everything out on the tiered tray, and I found this little green one and was like, what did I make this for? And it wasn't until I was editing this video that I realized, oh, that's what it was for. So once that was dry, I glued it down to the center of this white block, and then I needed to create a stack of these, so I glued the bottom 3 letters together and then kind of placed them where I wanted them, glued them down, and this project was done. Here's another quick and easy project using 6 of these Jenga block pieces. I glued 2 together and then glued those 2 pieces on top of a third to create a little hat for our leprechaun. Gave each one of these 3 good coats of this green paint, and once that was dry, I took some black ribbon I had and wrapped it around the base of the hat, and then used one of the gold clovers off the necklace again as an embellishment on the front. St. Patrick's Day is not complete without green beer. I've never had green beer, but I know a lot of people that have, and it's a big deal, I guess. So I took some green paint and mixed it with some Mod Podge so it would swirl around this mini mason jar from Dollar Tree. I wish I would have had some alcohol paint or something that I could have used that made it more translucent. But I went with what I had on hand, and that was this green paint. Once it was fully coated, I did set it upside down and let the rest drain out, and then wiped the inside rim to remove the excess paint. And then I wanted this to look like it was frothy, so I used this cotton round. I don't actually use cotton balls, so I didn't have any, and this cotton round worked. It was a little more difficult, especially around the edges. But once that was all broken apart, I used hot glue around the edge of the jar and glued that in place. And then I added some baker's twine around the top to cover up those ridges where the lid went. In this project, I'm going to be using 5 craft sticks to create a directional signpost. I'm going to start by cutting off the rounded edge on one side. After figuring out the length I wanted, I used the first one I cut as a template to cut the other 4 down. Once those were all cut, I then created an arrow using one. And I used my X-Acto knife on this part instead of my scissors, because when you cut on a diagonal, it has a tendency to crack, and I didn't want that. So I used that, and then I used the first one as a template to draw the arrow on all of my craft sticks. Once all of those were done, I created the end of the arrow in the opposite direction. And again, using the X-Acto knife, cut that out and then traced that shape on the other 4 arrows before I cut everything out. I then took the 2 remaining craft sticks and cut off the round edge on one, used it as a template for the other to create the post that these directional signs will go on. And I wanted to use 2 to make it thicker and more sturdy, and then I just used hot glue to glue those together. Then I took some black paint and painted 2 of these Jenga block pieces and the center post for this sign. And then once those were dry, I did paint the arrows in 2 in green, 2 in white, and 1 in gold. And then using hot glue, I stuck the 2 Jenga block pieces on either side of the post. Using my Cricut for this, I did cut out some words for these directional signs and placed those on each one of the arrows. And then using a dab of hot glue, I placed each arrow on the stand in different directions and cattywampus and all that. So I had originally made the black rolling pin, and a few days later I was recording more projects and forgot that I had already made it, so I made the white one, but I decided to include both of them in this side by side so you can just see how I did it. I did do portions of them a little differently, but it's all the same result. Starting off by painting the paint stick a color and then adding words or these little beads from Dollar Tree to them. And then once everything was glued in place, I did give both of them a coat of Mod Podge just to keep those letters down. They're so skinny and little, they didn't really want to stick down. And then wrapped it with baker's twine, tied it with a little bow, and this project was done. Simple, easy, quick. So quick that I forgot it and did it twice. This little pot has been in my stash for years, and I knew I wanted to make a pot of gold, and I just happened to find this Connect 4 set in the toy aisle at Dollar Tree, and I have looked for one since, and I cannot find one, so it was complete luck. I started by giving all of the gold coins a coating of gold paint, and then took that same gold and put it around the rim of this pot and on these molded handles, and also the handle on top. Once everything was dry, I took a piece of tissue paper and shoved it inside the pot using another cotton round. I fluffed that up because I needed something for the coins to sit on. And then I hot glued that into place and then started to glue into place the coins going around the outside or the inside of the bottom rim. And once that was done, I went in with a second ring of these and kind of placed them more standing up than laying down. Once that was all done, then I just took the remaining coins I had and kind of filled in the blanks, focusing more on the front and sides than the back. And I did at the end up painting some of the white fluff that you could see in between some of the coins. I did paint that gold to kind of cover up that stark white. And then once I was done with that, I took a green shamrock and placed it on the front, gluing it down. Thanks for taking the time to craft with me today. I really hope you enjoyed this St. Patrick's Day tiered tray decor. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!